away. He said it wouldn't last.
And it's just getting kind of rolled along. I'm John St. Clair. I was born in Cotton Center, Texas in 1931.
My full name is Mary Jeanette St. Clair. I forgot I was Hancock before I was St. Clair. And I'm 73 years old. I was born in Abernathy, Texas in 1934.
My parents married in September of 29. My mother lived right at Cotton Center. Daddy came from Erath County, about 100 miles from there. And I don't know, they was all up there pulling cotton, I think, and that's the way they met.
Pawpaw was born in Knott, Texas in 1909, and Mother was born in a little town close to Pilot Point in 1912. They met at a dance. They used to have dances in people's houses, and they always had somebody that could play the fiddle and the guitar, and so they'd just have a dance in somebody's house. And Mother and Daddy had seen each other at these dances. Mother kind of caught his eye. He started coming around to their house. Mother began to like him, and they started going to the dances together. All at once, they decided that they were going to go to Clovis and get married. So Daddy had a new car that Mother and Daddy dated in, and so he came and picked her up, and they went to Clovis, New Mexico on Christmas Day and found a judge that married them.
Now, it's so small, they put me on a pillow, they tell me, for about 3 months till it got big enough to get off of it. And then my mother didn't have any milk, so I got to nurse my aunt till she got to bringing milk.
On the night that I was born, both my grandmothers, my mother's mother and my dad's mother, were there because you didn't go to the hospital to have your babies, you had them at home. And Mother loved to eat sweet potatoes, raw sweet potatoes. And so I hadn't been born very long, and I had to go to the bathroom, and it was like a sweet potato. And both grandmothers said, "What are we going to do? The doctor's on his way." And so they decided to throw it in the wood stove. So that's what they did. And that was one of the stories that I grew up. They all teased me about my sweet potatoes. And I never did like baked sweet potatoes when I was growing up, and I still don't.
After I was born, my mother and daddy bought some land in a variety store in Morton, so we moved over there. I don't know how long we lived there. I imagine a couple of years or something, and then we moved from there to Kamada, and Daddy went to work on the Rio Grande River. It's putting in a dam across there. Then my mother and Daddy and grandmother and granddaddy decided that they was going to Fence Lake, New Mexico. So they hooked up, and Daddy had a new car, and they took off, and they went to Fence Lake, New Mexico. Well, I wasn't growing as much as they thought I should be. So the whole community had a operation, take all of the people's kids' tonsils out. And on this, they had a big new hospital there. It's all adobe. So they had a table in there, and they just had one doctor, and one doctor operated on them all. And whenever you got your operation, you got ice cream. So anyway, that's about all I remember about that, except they got everybody took care of, and we all had an ice cream treat.
We only had running water in the kitchen, just cold water, and we had an outdoor toilet, and we had what we called a slop jar. And in the night, when any of the family had to go to the bathroom, you went in this big double closet that we had and used the slop jar to go to the bathroom, and it had a lid on it. In the daytime, Mother took the slop jar out and emptied it in the old outdoor toilet, and of course she would scrub it and everything so that it didn't, because Mother was always Mrs. Clean, so it never smelled or anything. Of course, Aunt Janie and I, after we got up big enough, we washed our hair every night after we'd been plowing all day. We had a little foot tub, is what we called it, and of course we had an old tea kettle, and Mother would heat the water and put it in the little tub, and Aunt Janie would usually wash her hair first, and then Mother would heat more water for me to wash my hair. But then on Saturday night, we all took a bath, and we started out with my little brother, and we didn't change the water, and then it was me, and then it was Aunt Janie, and then it was Mother, and then it was Daddy, and we took a bath in the same water.
Well, during World War II, it is getting everybody to help some way to make the war deal go. And my uncle and aunt and my mother, my daddy, my two cousins from around the Hale Center went to California to work in the shipyards. While I was living there in California, I got homesick for Fence Lake, New Mexico. And so they carried me to Los Angeles, put me on the Silver Chief train, and sent me to Gallup, New Mexico. They put you in a little deal with where you're going to sleep, and then they zipped them sides up around you, and you didn't know nothing was going on until the next day about a certain time. And then you had to get up and go down to the dining car. And we went down there and ate, and then you went back. I don't know. I went through the Painted Desert, the Petrified Forest, and that's about all of getting to Gallup. And when I got up there, I was supposed to have somebody to pick me up in Gallup. And some way they was running a little late, or we was running a little early. And anyway, well, we didn't get there at the same time. So I went down to into Gallup, where I knew my granddaddy and my daddy had been buying groceries, and fooled around there, and they come by and picked me up.
The old sow on the first farm that we ever lived on, she had all of these pigs, and she started to eat them. And so Mother and Daddy got all of the little baby pigs into a number 3 tub and fed them on the bottle. And we kept them in our kitchen for several weeks. And the old sow died. And so we took her, Daddy took her out, they pulled her out into our old orchard and buried her, not too deep. And so my cousin came to visit with us, and we would go out and play on the pig's grave, and we liked to get out there and tromp on it, and the pig was full of gas and it would blow the earth up, and we thought that was so much fun.
You see what I've had to put up with all that time?
And one night, the second farm we lived on, Mother let us sleep outside, and we had an old barn and some old cow troughs. And of course we didn't do much sleeping because the little neighbor girl was spending the night with me and Aunt Janie. And it was in the summer, so we just prowled around out at the barn all night long. And an old cat, it was her time to deliver, so we went and watched the cat deliver the kittens. We were well informed about what was going on the farm. We always, from the time I can remember, we pulled cotton, and Janie and I could pull 50 pounds in our sacks, and Mother pulled 200 or 250, and Daddy would pull 500. And then you went up and weighed them on an old scale with a P that you had to weigh, and then you emptied them, and then they took them to the gin. But we always had to work. We had 2 old horses, and Daddy said that we would pick up somebody's corn for so much money, and we always needed money. And so we went and picked up corn, and Mother and Daddy would take our car and my little brother and go home and leave Janie and I over at the corn patch to bring the 2 horses and the wagon with some corn in it home. And the horses would do pretty good until we got close to home. And then they hadn't had anything to eat or drink all day, and so they were ready to get home, and they would start running. And so we had several runaway wagon trips. And one time, Janie and I decided we were going to ride. It was 2 horses, a mare and a whatever the other male is. Aunt Janie rode the male horse, and we had a big fence that was about 4 foot high, and the horse started running, and she was holding on to the mane, and the horse jumped the fence. She rode it just like a pro until he got over the fence and he stopped, and when he stopped, she fell off.
My dad got a job at Co-op Gin in Cotton Center, Texas, and he was hauling cotton burrs, cotton seed, from there to Lubbock, and they was processing them down there. So he got a fall job down there in 1943. And we lived there from 1943 till I graduated high school at Cotton Center.
We went to school together, and when I first met him, he had another girlfriend, and I had another boyfriend.
Who do I have?
Phoebe Clark. And anyway, Daddy wouldn't let me date.
What did she look like?
And I wasn't supposed to wear makeup or anything, but of course I would. And when we first got to know each other, I didn't like him. He and Gerald were 2 bad boys. So instead of asking me for a date, he came and asked my daddy if I could go to the movie one night with him. And Daddy said yes, because they played 42 and went to church with his mother and dad. So Daddy thought he was really being smart to let me go to the movie with Day. And I didn't like him the first couple of times that I dated him, but I thought, oh, well, you know. And then after I got to know him, I kinda got to where I kinda liked him. We knew we were gonna get to have a date on Friday and Saturday night, so Da Johnie would get $5 from Granddaddy for helping on the farm, and they would come over and we would go to a movie at Plainview at the Granada, and it was a big movie, and it had a balcony, and that's where all the lovers sat. And of course, that's where we always went. And the ceiling it had stars and a moon. It looked like you were outside. And The Granada, that was a real treat to get to go to the Granada. We dated for 18 months, and that's when we decided that we wanted to get engaged and get married. Everybody didn't believe us when Dad gave me the engagement ring that we were going to get married. He gave me the engagement ring on January 16th. And we were engaged until we got married June the 11th of 1950. And we got married at the Church of Christ, and Brother Darling was the one that married us. And the hospital in Hale Center was across the street. And my mother and Daddy were across the street because Daddy was in the hospital. He had accidentally shot himself in the leg. Our principal at the time, he thought we were too young, and so he tried every way in the world to break us up or to separate us and my cousin and her boyfriend. Mr. Mooring was his name. And then after we got married, we went back to school that summer to a reunion. Our annuals hadn't come in, so we had to go back to school for everybody to sign our annuals. And of course, my dad had accidentally shot himself in the leg. And Mr. Mooring told everybody that at the school annual party that the reason Mr. Hancock had shot himself in the leg was because he saw what he was going to get for his son-in-law. Brother Darling married us, and he decided that we got there at about 9 o'clock on a Sunday morning, and plenty of time for everybody to be in Sunday school, as we called it. But he decided that we were so young, he needed to give us a lecture. So he took us into his office and gave us a lecture on marriage. And by the time we got out of the lecture, it was 10 minutes till 10 by the church clock, and everybody was coming into church, and we were standing at the front of the church with Johnny's mother and dad, and he was performing the marriage ceremony, and people were coming in while we were standing at the front of the church. But we went to Roswell, New Mexico and stayed 2 days, and we stayed in motels, and we thought we were uptown, and we went out to a swimming hole, a really famous swimming hole in Roswell, and I had a new white swimsuit, and I'd never worn it before, and when I got in the water and got wet, it was see-through. So Day started having a fit, and we had to get out of the water real quick and get my towel on. Then we went the next day to the bottomless lakes there outside of Roswell. And then we went home a day early because we were running out of money. And so we went and spent the night at his mom and dad's, and then we went and spent the next night with my mother and dad. We hadn't been married but a couple of weeks, and we were going to bed early because Day was going to have to get up, go help his dad on the farm the next morning. And we went to bed, and we hadn't been in bed very long, and we heard all of this laughing outside, and a bunch of kids from our school and Johnny's two cousins, Bonita and Gerald, came, and they brought all kinds of refreshments because Uncle Layman and Aunt Van had a grocery store. So they did what they call chivalry. And so they just kept me in what was our front room, was a bedroom, and they took Johnny in and put him on the table, the boys did, while the girls kept me occupied, and they laid him on the dining room table and painted him all over with shoe polish, black shoe polish. And he tried to get up, and he did get up, got away from them, and ran out the front door and ran into a fence. And he still has a scar up here where he ran into the fence. But he came back unscathed, but they short-sheeted our bed, and they all had a big time, but we didn't think it was too much fun. We hadn't been married but about 18 months, and we went to Albuquerque, New Mexico with grandmother and granddaddy and Johnny's two little sisters to see his grandmother and granddad that lived in Albuquerque. And while we were out there, I kept getting morning sickness. So guess what? We were expecting Jana. Of course, back then you didn't know, and there wasn't, they couldn't tell. So anyway, we would go downtown to look for turquoise jewelry and just to, be going downtown. And the guys went to some baseball games while the women went shopping, and I would have to go out between the cars and throw up. And Johnny's aunt kept pouring Pepto-Bismol down me, and to this day I cannot stand Pepto-Bismol. That fall, we decided that Johnny got a job at Cottle Gin. So we moved to a little house in Hale Center. And that's where Jana was born, was in the hospital at Hale Center. In 1952, January 30th. She was always so stubborn, and Day and I were very strict because my parents had been strict, and then the rearing of the child or the children was left up to the woman because the man was out trying to make the living, and they left the discipline mostly up to you. We always wanted her, when we said do something, she was supposed to do it right then. And
well, ain't no need of doing it if you're going to do it 2 or 3 hours later. Jeanette had told Jana one time, said, don't get into the makeup. Said, that's just for grown people. So she got into the makeup, and she had painted herself all over. Oh, shoot. And then I went to work for Co-op Gin.
in Cotton Center.
In Cotton Center, yeah.
And we moved to a little one-room house.
No bathroom.
No bathroom.
They did have water inside.
Yeah.
But that's all they had.
But we got all of our furniture into that big one room, and I babysat for money while some of the people went to the basketball games. That didn't last long. That's when I learned to make tuna fish sandwiches.
She ain't forgot either.
I'd rather Da Johnie work at the gin and come home and eat tuna fish sandwiches, and we'd play canasta. And he beat me every night. Granddaddy would be waiting on Day to get up. He'd be sitting on the couch, rolling his Bull Durham and smoking, waiting for Day and Ninny and Jana to wake up. And of course, we'd had a hard time the night before getting Jana to sleep, so we were not ready to get up. But Da Johnnie's dad was ready to get up and get started farming.
I'd bought me a new tractor, new stripper, and built a bunch of trailers, and we was blowing and a-going. And we'd bought that new Buick too.
And then we were going to take hired hands home from cotton stripping, and there were 5 of us in the front seat of that new Buick, and I was 7 months pregnant with Johnny Lee, and we rolled it 3.5 times. It was just getting sundown, and Dave forgot that we were at a dead end, and he put on the brakes, and they had been hanging, but we just hadn't got around to getting them fixed. And so we flipped the car. They and Jana was between us, and she had a scratch on her arm.
And my two sisters were with us,
Yeah,
wasn't she?
Juanita and Darlene. We were all in the front seat. Jenna had a scratch on her arm, and we had, when we rolled over, we had sand and glass and everything in our hair. And we went to the hospital, and the doctor decided, because I was 7 months pregnant, that they better keep me overnight in the hospital. And the rest of them got to go home. And everything worked out fine. And John Lay came along 2 years and 6 days after Jana. And so we had 2 little ones. It was hit or miss, and you never knew when you were gonna hit good and when you were gonna miss good.
Well, we didn't make it a farming there, so we moved to Dallas, and we stayed down there 18 months.
Well, we must have had a little bit of money, because Da Johnie rode the Greyhound bus from Hale Center to Dallas.
Yeah, it cost about $15 or something, I don't remember.
And then he came back a week later after he'd got a job and had rented an old apartment, and we were in a duplex. There was a couple and their kids and their dog next door. And we'd never lived next door to anybody, and of course we could hear them talking at night.
And doing other things.
And flushing their commode. And,
Yeah.
and so we only lived there 3 months. And they decided that he was gonna buy us a new house, but that was in Oak Cliff, Dallas, Oak Cliff. And now, Oak Cliff was just an old part of Dallas, but it was a nice part of Dallas. And we moved out to Casaview, and it was in the edge of Mesquite, Texas, just a little ways out of Dallas city limits. And we had a deep freeze. We always nearly had a deep freeze, and one summer we had put black-eyed peas. We had shelled black-eyed peas, and we didn't know. We put them on the cabinet in dish pans full of water, and we didn't know they'd sprout overnight, because we planned to sack them the next morning and put them in the deep freeze. And they sprouted. But we
Sprouts on them about that long.
We went ahead and put them in the deep freeze, and we also had put up some corn in the deep freeze. So when we lived in Dallas and we started getting hungry, we ate sprouted black-eyed peas and corn out of the deep freeze, and I'd make cornbread, and we could nearly always buy milk. That's the first time that Jana ever did any sleepwalking, was when we lived in Dallas. And we were almost asleep one night, and we heard the front screen slam, and she had gone out the front door and ran down the sidewalk, and then she just turned around after she got down there a little ways and came back. Of course, we were up to see what was going on, and she had gone in there and gone back to bed.
We decided the city life wasn't too good, so we moved back to Texaco, New Mexico, and we started farming again there.
We lived in Olton, Texas for 5 years, and we rented a farm down there, and that's where we lived when Jana and Wilton got married, and that's where we lived when Trenton was born. And that's where we had our first Christmas with Trenton. And then we moved to Muleshoe and lived in town and farmed 13 miles. They farmed 13 miles toward Earth. What direction was that?
East.
East of Muleshoe.
Just ask me. About midnight one night, I was going to change that water, and I reached down to pull the pipe apart, and when I did, it all come off together and left me a setting in the manure. I pulled off my breeches, clothes, shirts and all, so that it wouldn't look and smell quite so bad. And as I started around the light, they picked me up.
The police happened to know him, and they wanted to know why he was driving around with just his underwear on.
They thought I was having a ball.
Yeah, I'm sure they did.
Anyway, I told them that what had happened, so they let me go.
Jana had 3 boys, Trenton and Brandon and Devin. We played some kind of game all of the time. They also loved to come to our house and play with the tape recorder. They'd get in there, and Trenton and Brandon especially, and talk into it. And we'd rewind it and let them hear themselves talk, and they thought that was a lot of fun.
Who do we send the bill to for this?
Oh.